Hello everyone, hi. So, as many of you know, I study comparative literature, and that means that in my studies I look at texts not just from one language, but we sort of transcend language borders, but we also transcend borders of medium. So what that means is that we might ask ourselves how a painting inspired the title of a book, or how a poem inspired a specific piece of classical music, and of course how books have been translated into movies and how the medium of books and movies go together, the sort of difficulties and advantages both of those mediums have. And so I naturally get recommended a lot of movies. And every time that in this semester a movie was mentioned in any of my classes, I wrote it down on this list and I came up with a total of 17 different movies that I'm gonna tell you about today. And the intensity to which we watched them sort of varied from a movie just being mentioned to watching bits of it in class. And I'll also tell you how those movies relate to what I've been studying in those courses, because I think that's the most interesting part and what I would have liked to know before I decided on studying literature. So if you enjoy this, I will be so happy if you subscribed. And now let's get into the main part of this video. So the first course I want to talk about is my course on the topic of time and memory in modern literature. That was my favorite course and we also got recommended the most movies in this course. So the first movie we talked about and I also watched was Der Zauberberg by Hans V. Geisendörfer. So it's the 1982 movie of The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, based on the novel of The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. And it's actually available on YouTube in German. I'm not sure whether the English subtitles work. But yeah, the Magic Mountain was a big topic in our course. We read parts of it and we talked about what Thomas Mann did with time. And then when we cross-compared that to the movie, of course, it's difficult to translate a 1,000-page novel into a movie of a couple of hours. So you have to leave a lot of things out. But I think the movie still did a very great job of sort of letting you imagine the sort of atmosphere that the Magic Mountain is playing in. The next movie we talked about in this course was Memento by Christopher Nolan. And that, of course, is an interesting movie in terms of time because it is about a man who suffers from short-term memory loss. So he can't remember what happened the day before and he starts tattooing the facts of his life onto his body. And in a way it is told backwards, so we're in the shoes of the main character, also not knowing what happened, and we slowly pierce things together and find out what has actually happened with his wife. So he thinks his wife has been murdered and he wants to find out what has happened, and we sort of we do that with him in a way. Then we had a big topic on Virginia Woolf's novels. We talked mainly about Orlando, To the Lighthouse, Mrs. Dalloway, The Waves, The Years, and The Hours. And there's a Mrs. Dalloway movie, of course, by Marlene Goris. It's a 1997 movie. But mostly what we talked about is the 2002 movie The Hours by Stephen Daldry. And we watched the opening scene. I'm gonna link it in the description box down below because it explains very well how the book is, and the movie of course, is layered into these 3 different levels of time and how they sort of play out parallel or simultaneously. And we talked about how perfect Virginia Woolf's novels are to turn into movies. They just sort of scream to be put into film. Yeah, I really enjoyed this sort of long, intense discussion around Virginia Woolf. Then the next movie, it's not really a movie, it's an opera we talked about. It's the Richard Strauss opera of Der Rosencavalier, and he wrote it together with Hugo von Hofmannsthal. And we watched this scene of a woman, sort of an older woman, looking into the mirror, feeling a little bit sentimental that she's aging, and also feeling a little bit strange because she still feels like she's the same person, yet the mirror says something different. Then we talked about Marcel Proust and how almost impossible it is to make a movie out of In Search of Lost Time, Marcel Proust's big, sprawling 7-part novel. But it has been tried, and there is a very honorable try by Raoul Ruiz, or Raoul Ruiz, I'm not sure, in his 1999 movie Le Temps Retrouvé. And we talked about how he's really trying to tell the story in a Proustian way. So he focused on this like matinee in part 7 and just works with flashback that this character is having. The main character, by the way, who looks exactly like Proust, which is very debatable because we don't know whether the first person narrator in our novel actually is Marcel Proust or not. Anyways, he works with these flashbacks, and then he uses methods of making us feel like a lot of time has passed. So he's filming our main narrator, so who looks like Marcel Proust in this case, and his eyes are moving a lot faster than everything around him, so it makes you think that he's going through a lot of memories, that he's thinking about things, that time is spinning faster in his mind than it is in real life. So yeah, I mean, we concluded that Proust, what Proust does cannot really be translated into a movie. That I think that will be impossible, but that is a very creative try. Then we talked about Cloud Atlas by Lana Wachowski and Lily Wachowski and Tom Tykwer. That, Cloud Atlas is based on the 2004 novel by David Mitchell, and it's a movie that plays on many different timelines, and the actors, sort of the same cast of actors, keeps coming back to install this sense of eternal recurrence of the same people in your life, of many different lives, having different relationships with sort of the same soul. And we talked about how the book has another layer of time that is not actually in the movie, and how the book is sort of opening these layers of time one after the other and then closes them again. And yeah, it's just a very good movie about fate, and the movie really gives you a feeling of an eternally interwoven net that you just can't escape. Alright, so that was every movie that was mentioned in this course. Let's move over to my course on literary theory and provocative thinkers and provocative theories on literature. So I only have 2, well, maybe 3 movies here. So the first movie we talked about is an HBO documentary called Regarding Susan Sontag. And we talked about Susan Sontag a lot, especially about her essay against interpretation. And Susan Sontag really sort of mixed up the intellectual scene in the mid-20th century. And she was a very bold, intellectual woman who just came out with a lot of provocative theories. One of them was that the way we're always trying to interpret works and look for the hidden meaning in something is actually not doing art a favor. also just the structure or the picture it presents can be beautiful and can be appreciated without always feeling like you have to decode something. Yeah, so that's what her essay is about. I mean, obviously there's more nuance to it, and she changed her mind later, and etc., etc. But there is an HBO documentary about her, and she also plays part in a movie by Woody Allen. His mockumentary called Zelig, she's basically opening that movie, which is very cool. We watched that opening. And then the other two movies we talked about are Slavoj Žižek's A Pervert's Guide to Ideology and A Pervert's Guide to the Cinema. So how we came to talk about Slavoj Žižek was that we were talking about ideology and how different philosophers have made us aware of like the net of language and ideology that we're caught in. And the one philosopher who is really still stirring that pot today is Slavoj Žižek, a very controversial man of the Laibach school. And in his movies, he shows us how basically our art and our media are full of ideology. So we think that we're just going to the movies to relax or have a fun evening. But actually what is happening is that we're getting indoctrinated with our cultural ideals. And in these movies, he, for example, talks about the Coca-Cola commercials and what they instill in us, but also about movies like Titanic and how sort of utterly ridiculous they're put together. And it's very enjoyable. It's very controversial, very punch in the gut sort of thing to watch, but also hilarious. So yeah, that's everything from this course. And then in the course of the colonial past and post-colonial present reflected in literature, we have also talked about a small handful of movies. The first one is Nova Zembla by Reinhard Oerlemans, which is about Willem Barents, a Dutch man who wanted to take the northern route to Indonesia instead of going south, so around Africa. And so that actually happened. He got stuck at Nova Zembla, which is, I think, a Russian island. And they had to spend the winter there, and they were like continuously attacked by ice bears and things like that. I talked about it more in my video about this course if you're interested in it. And then Pearl Harbor was mentioned in passing, and the other movie, which I didn't watch yet, is about the Burma Railway from Burma to Bangkok. And there's a movie called The Railway Man by Jonathan Teplitsky. Yeah, about the building of this railway and sort of how excruciating it was for the people who had to build it. So many people lost their lives. I haven't watched that movie. Again, it seems like a little bit heavy, but probably interesting movie to watch or even to find out more about. And then, I mean, that doesn't really count as a movie, but we watched the apology speeches of the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and also of the Dutch King William Alexander, how they apologized for the Dutch involvement in slave trade and slavery. Again, more about all of that in those two videos that I did if you're interested. And then I just have a couple of more movies to mention from my introductory class to literature and comparative literature. The first one is Medea by Pier Paolo Pasolini. So we talked about this very old text of Medea and how it has been rewritten and reinterpreted in many ways and also in many different kinds of media. So we looked at paintings by Frederick Sandys, Anselm Feuerbach and so on. And we also talked about how it was translated into different pieces of theater and movies. Which is very interesting how much you can do with the basic theme of Medea. And then the other movie, which was again just sort of mentioned in passing, is Adresse Unknown by Paul Lucas, the 1944 movie. I've actually seen that is on YouTube as well, so I haven't personally watched it, but I have read the book and loved the book. I've just recommended it in my latest video. And yeah, again, it's about two men. One of them is Jewish, lives in America. The other one lives in Germany. And how the Nazi ideology is sort of turning their friendship sour. Yes, so that's all the movies that were mentioned in class this semester. Maybe you have one or two that you would like to watch. Let me know if you do. And otherwise, I will see you again very soon. Bye bye.